Hello. Hi, everyone. Thank you for everyone who is joining here on Zoom. We're at max capacity. And to our friends watching our live stream on YouTube and being flexible with us as we accommodated a huge response to this training. So we are, happy to be here and offer it to you guys because it seems like this is information you all want to know. So I'm Angela Mock. I'm a certified HR professional. I'm a Cooper manager and qualified. My co-facilitator, Kiana, is over on YouTube moderating that chat. And we appreciate you, Kiana, and my colleagues Rebecca and Anaya are supporting as well here on Zoom and YouTube. So today, obviously, we're talking about trauma-informed youth development and mentoring. There should be a handout that you have access to, and you want to get that up for sure. And I will assure you that there will be a recording, probably multiple recordings, a recording of our live stream and a recording of our Zoom, which will be updated with a transcript, and you will get the slides as well, and you'll be resent that handout. And again, in our follow-up, if you are interested in getting a certificate for coming today, Rebecca, if you can drop my email in the chat, you can email me, Renee Angelo, and we will make sure that that is issued to you. So I know we have friends from all over today, and we appreciate that. It's the magic of virtual, of the virtual world, of virtual training, which is why I love it. But we are Mentor Maryland DC. We primarily serve the Maryland DC area, but we are an affiliate of the National Mentoring Partnership. There's actually 24 or so affiliates across the US here to serve you all and ensure that that our region of the United States, right, has enough quality mentors for our young people and to close the mentoring gap. So we are a nonprofit organization. We are focused on our mentoring movement here in Maryland and DC. And we do this in a lot of ways. And this is one of the ways that we do it, right? By bringing best practices information to you all. And today that's about trauma-informed youth development. So some of the things that we offer, again, we're a part of the National Mentoring Partnership, who do tons of research. And, they trained me in this topic. They do the standards of what are best practices in mentoring and offer trainings. Some of you let us know if you were at the National Mentoring Summit in January. A great time held annually, January National Mentoring Month, if you didn't know. Another vital thing we do is celebrate National Mentoring Month with you all. So National Mentoring National Mentoring Partnership is a huge resource that we aim to connect you all with. We also offer technical assistance to the National Mentoring Resource Center, which is when you can connect with one of our consultants or some of us about what your mentoring program needs. We also, so here at Mentor Maryland DC, we manage the regional part of the Mentoring Connector, which is a national database of mentoring programs. So for prospective mentors looking to mentor, they can go find your program. And for young people looking for programs, they can go to the Mentoring Connector. So if your program is not in the Mentoring Connector, get in touch with us. Rebecca specifically is right now taking the charge of our Mentoring Connectors. So it is really a great resource for recruitment and prospective young people as well. So training, that's one of the things that we do. We appreciate you all being here. Today's training is in partnership with the Y of Central Maryland. So thank you to the Y for collaborating with us to put this on. Another thing is our regional roundtables, which you probably connected with my co-facilitator Kiana or my colleague Dayon across Maryland and DC, where we connect regionally about what's going on specifically in your area. Again, back to mentoring best practices, we have our element of effective practice for mentoring. So right now we're on the 4th edition. The 5th edition is coming out later this year, which is super exciting. So when we get that new information to you all, that new information, we will be bringing it to you all so everyone's up to speed on what are the best practices for mentoring through mentoring programs. Another vital thing we do as part of technical assistance is access to the National Quality Mentoring System, which is a national, basically accreditation for your mentoring program to assure quality. So that's something you can do through technical assistance. So definitely connect with one of our team members if you're interested in doing that with your program. We aim to keep you abreast of funding opportunities, often via our newsletter, but also via those roundtables and connecting with my colleagues. So be sure that you are in touch with us as much as you possibly can be. And if you're looking to start a program, there's great resources on the National Mentoring Partnership website, but please reach out to us about how to do that. So for my friends on Zoom, let's talk about some quick logistics. When's the last time we really reviewed all the things that we can do inside Zoom? So please stay on mute unless you've been called on. We're going back to the old days, especially because there's so many people. There is a chat. This is what the chat looks like over here. You can send a message to everyone. If you want to send a message to me, please do. I'm Renee, but it says Mentor Maryland DC today, or to our to my support today, Rebecca, if you are having a technical issue. And then we have all these reactions, right? Please connect with us and please keep that chat lively as well. I'll cue you to fill up the chat, but we have all these reactions that we can do. You can raise your hand. And yeah, so we can be as connected as possible. For my friends on YouTube, Kiana is moderating the chat. She should come up as Mentor Maryland DC. So she will be your support over there. So because there are so many of us and this is our standards for any space that we have, I really want to dive into our community standards today. So the goal of, Mentor Maryland DC in this training and our overall presence in the community is to create community with you all. And we are, again, feeling so grateful that so many people are showing up today as part of it. So, and we also know that this is what our youth crave from us, right? Is community and safe spaces or safer spaces, right? So we want to be clear about what our standards are here at Mentor Maryland DC, which is that our community is open to all, right? Everyone is welcome, but we want to acknowledge, right? The deep-seated racism, sexism, homotransphobia, misogyny, ableism that is pervasive in our country. We stand up against these isms and actively work against them, especially with our young people. And, this informs our approach of how we approach our work. We encourage you to share openly, listen even more openly, right? And be open to when, your sharing may hurt someone else, right? One person's yes moment might be another person's trigger. So we want to keep that in mind and be open to receiving feedback. We like to say, be generous with your positive assumptions and don't be afraid to ask genuine questions. So we want to ensure that we are assuming the best about people. And then if we're having a different feeling, we turn to wonder and questions about that feeling rather than immediately reacting against somebody. So no matter what your role today, be a host. There's a lot of people in this space. So we want to ensure that while we are hosting you, myself and my colleagues on the call, that we all have the ability to make everyone feel great in this space and to approach others with openness and warmth and create a space that we can all enjoy. So we want to be clear that we're sharing this responsibility and that everybody in this space has that responsibility. We don't necessarily endeavor to create safe or comfortable spaces, but rather brave spaces where we can explore our discomfort and our beliefs and practices can be challenged, right? This is part of our learning, a part of our growth. We want to be at the edge of our comfort zone and remind ourselves that if we're not comfortable, it doesn't necessarily mean that we are in danger. So we want to look for that lesson in our emotions and reactions. And again, we want the community experience to be supportive and educational, but also fun. So we encourage you to bring your full and present self. It is most welcome. And like I said, we're in for it today. And we're challenging the notion that people have short attention spans and aren't able to hang, right? So we do have a long time ahead of us today to work together, but I think we will have some fun and we have a lot to gain from being here in community with each other today. And then we say no fixing, saving, advising, or correcting. So this is directly from one of our tools, the Touchstone for Developing a Trust Framework. I would encourage you to look into if you're interested, but this is somewhat self-explanatory, right? We do feel that if you need to deliver feedback, that you ask permission, and that we always listen first. And I'm dropping that YouTube link one more time in the chat if you need to share with anyone. So, thank you for listening to our standards and in the spirit of transparency, we want to be clear that if any of our staff today feels that there's a violation of these standards, that we reserve the right to remove that person or follow up with that person to speak one-on-one for resolution. If you have any questions about the standards, or if during or after this session you want to report a potential violation of our standards, please reach out to anybody on our team, and we will be sure to follow up because that is our promise, as part of our standards. So thank you for reviewing, and now we are ready to jump into content. So I'm going to ask you one more time. I'm going to ask you to break a lot of times, probably to drop the link to the handout to make sure that we have it because we're jumping in. For our friends on YouTube, make sure you have that handout open, and we're going to get in. So this is simply our agenda today, is that we're going to go over these 4 R's. So the 4 R's of trauma-informed care, and we're going to specifically be talking about it in the context, of course, of youth development and mentoring. So we're going to start with realizing. So the widespread impact of trauma and understand how people can potentially get to recovery. We're going to recognize the signs and symptoms of trauma for the people that we serve, but really for anybody, right? And then we're going to move into this practice of responding. So now we're going to, with the knowledge that we're gaining from our realizing and recognizing ours, we're going to apply that knowledge to best youth development practices for interacting with young people, specifically in a mentoring space. And then we're also going to talk about, how do we resist re-traumatization of the young people that we serve, but as well as for the adults that care for them. So it's good with you. We're gonna get right into it. Okay. So what is trauma? What are we even talking about? I'm not going to assume that everybody knows. Yes, the slides will be shared, so do not worry about that. They'll be shared via email, but eventually they will also be on our website. And Rebecca, if you see anybody in the reading room, can you just send them the live stream link? Thank you. Okay, so what is trauma? We have a few definitions here from all of our trusted dictionary sources. So an experience that produces psychological injury or pain, a disordered psychic or behavioral state resulting from a severe mental or emotional stress and physical injury. The simple definition from Webster is a very difficult or unpleasant experience that causes someone to have mental or emotional problems, usually for a long time. And that is probably the closest definition to what I would say is the full definition, which is here from SAMHSA, the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration, a great resource, by the way. Go to their website. But their definition is individual trauma results from an event, series of events, or set of circumstances that is experienced by an individual as physical or emotionally harmful or threatening, and that has lasting adverse effects on the individual's functioning, physical, social, emotional, and spiritual well-being. So there are a lot of great things that I love about this definition that I want you to hold with you as we, receive the rest of the content we're going to go through today. So it focuses on the individual, right? So trauma is determined by the individual, and two people can go through the same experience that we made from the outside view as traumatic, but per individual depends if it is a trauma, because a trauma has to go to those lasting adverse effects that are part of this definition. So two people could experience the same negative experience, but only one person is having that lasting adverse effects to their physical, social, emotional, and spiritual well-being. The other side of that is that trauma can result from an event, a series of events, or a set of circumstances. So there's lots of different variations, and we'll talk about examples of trauma in our next slide. But it's not just kind of that one thing that we may assume that it is that one thing that happened to you. It could be a series, it could be the circumstances, which we'll talk about. And again, it comes down to that individual's experience after the trauma. Are there these lasting adverse effects that are affecting their ability to, to function to their highest potential? So some examples of trauma, a lot of these are kind of reminding us of that capital T trauma, right? Different kinds of abuse, witnessing violence of any kind, loss and abandonment, shootings, gun violence, substance misuse, car accidents, childhood trauma, children being betrayed by adults. But we also want to acknowledge, well, hey, let me know in the chat. Are we missing any types of trauma here? Please share. But also, and we want to be clear that this list is not exhaustive, right? Because again, trauma ends up being determined by that individual who's experiencing those lasting adverse effects. But we also want to acknowledge here some traumas that you might not always see, right? Poverty and economic circumstances. So again, these are those circumstances that we saw in that definition earlier that could have lasting adverse effects on someone, as well as, systemic oppression and racism. So, which we'll talk about and address right here. So race-based trauma is real, and the data is proving this to be so. So race-based trauma are negative experiences related to a person's race, including discrimination and harassment. So in addition to the effects of race-based trauma, it could be, inequality and access to quality education, healthcare, housing, a direct impact on lack of access. People experiencing race-based trauma become vigilant and attempt to avoid racism, and can experience ongoing daily stress and worry about race-related issues that result in the negative effects of trauma that we're going to talk about, poor mental health and physical health outcomes. This does not just affect adults, right? trauma affects everyone, which we'll learn about as well. But this type of trauma has the same effects of the traumas that we saw on the previous slide. So we want to not discount what anybody's single trauma may be, because again, it could be a variety of things. And trauma is really about those lasting adverse effects. And then we also want to acknowledge that trauma compounds when someone experiences more than one. So we want to acknowledge, particularly for race-based trauma, that the particular group may be more at risk of experiencing more trauma and the effects of trauma, which we're going to talk about next. So in addition to the direct experience of trauma, we can inherit conditions related to the traumatic experiences of our parents. So Dr. Rachel Yehuda, a professor of psychiatry and neuroscience at the Mount Sinai School of Medicine, who examined the neurobiology, neuro being brains, of PTSD and Holocaust survivors and their children. So what we come to learn is that trauma predisposes the effects of trauma. So children of Holocaust survivors were born with low cortisol levels. This is a stress hormone that helps our body return to normal conditions after trauma and stressful experiences, predisposing them to the experience of the PTSD systems of the previous generation. So yeah, so many things start with parents, and this is one of them. And they found, or Dr. Rachel found, that children whose parents had PTSD were 3 times more likely to have PTSD. This is one of those things that, the term at risk is kind of falling out of favor, and rightly so. But this is what we're talking about, like a real risk, right? A risk of PTSD and end of more trauma. So we do want to acknowledge that, because this is all the way down to the brains of the people who are experiencing trauma and the generational effects. And we'll address this a bit later as well, but 50 to 70% of those with PTSD also meet the criteria for major depressive disorder or another mood or anxiety disorder. So this is what we call a comorbidity. So when 2 or more conditions are present at the same time, they're co-occurring. And, that makes life difficult, you may imagine. As somebody with multiple comorbidities myself, this makes healthcare and accessing, meaningful treatment difficult, to say the least. And again, trauma is a hidden wound, right? We're talking about people's brains. And when it's a wound we can't see, we want to be as clear as possible as we are here getting trauma informed that it is having an impact on the brain. So this photo highlights the difference between a healthy brain and a brain of somebody who has experienced abuse. The 2021 to 2022 National Survey of Children's Health estimates that 21.3% of children nationwide have experienced one trauma. So that's a little over 1 in 5. That's a lot. And I assume a lot of you serve more than 5 young people at your program. So that goes to say that there are likely young people who have experienced trauma at your program just by the sheer numbers of it, right? So we want to acknowledge it. And also that's not always something that we will see. And if we can't see it, what are we going to do? So there may be some things that we can see, right? And these are the signs and symptoms or possible signs and symptoms of trauma. I want to be clear that it is possibilities, and this list is also not exhaustive. So one, let's take a minute to look over this list. Let me know, are there any missing that from working with people with trauma or experiencing your own trauma? But this really covers, the gambit, right? We have, physical manifestations, mood-related manifestations, a lot of physical manifestations, right? Talking about experiencing pain, appetite and weight. When it comes to our, our mental faculties and low self-esteem and confidence, acting withdrawn and isolating, engaging in risky behavior for our young people, maybe difficulty focusing, concentrating on memory loss. Being irritable, being anxious, again, that hypervigilance that we talked about with race-based trauma. This can happen for all traumas, concern for safety of self and others, being easily startled and, things like that, guilt and shame, due to their inability to protect themselves or their young one, depending on the experience of the trauma, whether that is stigmatized or something like that. But there's also, Jamel, yes, we will talk about that too, for sure. Hold on one second. There's also this reverse, which is positive systems. So this kind of correction, where a young person may be extremely well-mannered, helpful, and quiet, and high-performing as a result of trying to undo their trauma. There may also be no signs at all, right? You can't tell that someone has experienced trauma by looking at them. When we look at these lists, which again apply to young people and can apply to adults, we want to make the point here that a lot of these may be associated with what we would consider to be acting out, right? And we want to encourage you to shift your view as a future trauma-informed practitioner, that shift their view of things just being quote unquote bad behavior, poor performance, to an understanding that a youth may be going through something, right? And again, these positive system trauma survivors can kind of help them prove their worth. And we tend to overlook those young people because they're unproblematic, right? So they're kind of the period kind of situation is here that we want to make is that we shouldn't be making assumptions about young people's experiences or lack of experiences. There could be no signs at all, nothing that we can overtly view from the outside. So when we think about that, and when we think about how this applies to our trauma-informed youth development practices later, these are practices you're going to use for all young people, because we don't know every young person's history, and it's not, necessarily, it's not every child's. It should not be an expectation that young people have to disclose their trauma to be treated in a trauma-informed way. So I have a question for you all now. What is a coping mechanism? You can drop in the chat if you want to come off mute real quick. What is a coping mechanism? Yes, thank you for that in the chat, Michael. Check appreciate. Okay, says healthy boundaries. I saw someone come off mute. Hammond says the way a person manages trauma, right? Self-regulation. Great, great. So right, a coping mechanism, to put it as simply as possible, and I learned this from resiliency expert Dr. Ken Ginsberg, who I had the privilege of being trained years and years ago, is that a coping mechanism is something that helps you feel different, right? Trying to get away from that negative feeling that may be related to your trauma, the uncomfortable feelings that you're trying to avoid, and a coping mechanisms help you feel different. So that could be something like therapy, proper self-regulation can help us feel different, having boundaries, and again, how we're managing those uncomfortable feelings. But coping mechanisms can look, run the gambit as well. It can look like something like journaling, going to see my mentor, right? Going to my mentoring program, going to school. But there's also these kind of unhealthy coping mechanisms that can be really dangerous for young people, for any people, right? Well, hobbies, that's a good one, Debbie, right? So there's, substance use and other health-threatening habits. And Dr. Ginsberg made the point, right, that most substances are really, really good at making somebody feel different. And in that way, they're the most effective coping mechanism, because they can work quickly and make you feel different and very different for an extended period of time, depending on someone's use. So I say that to say that for two reasons, right? Is one, this is why it's important for us to help young people, and as well as us adults to do for ourselves, to work on healthy coping mechanisms. Because ideally, before we receive trauma, we want to have that kind of coping mechanism muscle built. So when we get into a situation where we need to regulate our emotions, when we're in a state of distress, we can still access those healthy coping skills that we've built. We don't necessarily need to resort to those super effective substances, etc., coping mechanisms that are, in the long run, potentially be really dangerous for us. Yeah, so thanks everybody. Great contributions in the chat as well. And coping mechanisms will look different, but we can think of the positive ones that we can help young people build, and we can build for ourselves. And it's something I'm working on as well, right? This is a lifelong kind of practice. I want to talk about the ACEs kind of quickly, but let me know in the chat if you've heard of the ACEs, as the Adverse Childhood Experiences. There's lots of data around this, and in the most simple version of the ACEs, it is a 10-question survey asking adults about their childhood experiences, and then there's a version for young people to be asked as well. So some of those average childhood experiences that they're asked about are on the screen here. So we talked a little bit about them. We saw them on the slides before. But what I'd like to remind people about the ACEs. So while there's great data and information we can gather from ACEs studies, what we know is that this is a a tool for professionals and for clinicians. It's not and to be implemented in a controlled environment, whether that's a doctor serving a young person, a therapist, or again, surveyors. It's not for us to be, asking of our young people, asking anybody. That's why we're not doing it today, right? It would not be appropriate. And people do not need to disclose their trauma, again, to be served by trauma-informed care. So what we do know is that 61% of adults have had at least one adverse childhood experiences, and that is ubiquitous across all groups. Trauma hits every racial and economic group. When we look at the data that says about people who have experienced 4 or more types of ACEs, that's about 16% of all adults. Women and racial and ethnic minority groups are at greater risk, it seems, to experiencing 4 or more ACEs. And what we also know from the ACEs study is that the more ACEs somebody has, the more at risk they are to the negative effects of trauma. So certain chronic diseases, mental illnesses, and just poor life outcomes go up the more ACEs that somebody has. So to look at that data regionally for Mentor Maryland, DC, but I gathered this data from the Data Resource Center for Child and Adolescent Health. So I'm going to ask Rebecca to drop the link so you can look for what it might be in your region. But for Maryland and DC, you can see here on the left, we have our no childhood. So this was a survey for young people, not adults. So children aged 0 to 17. About little over 60% of young people have no adverse childhood experiences. Love that for them. In the middle, we have one adverse childhood experience, and that is around 23%. That's slightly above the national average of 21.3%. And then when we get to two or more adverse childhood experiences, Maryland and DC are actually below the national average, which is 17.4%. So again, if your region's not here, you can pull this data from the 21-22 National Survey for Children's Health. And it is quite interesting. There's lots of other indicators on that survey that may be pertinent to the work that you do. But this is particularly about ACEs here in Maryland and DC. So I want to show you all this video from the CDC and their work on ACEs. So this is to help us reframe how we as a community can work to mitigate trauma. So we're going to watch this and then we will talk about it. Ah, hold on 1 second, because I have no sound. One second. I'm going to try something real quickly. All right, let's try this again.
It's had its share of problems.
There we go.
Hi, this is my neighborhood. I grew up in this building. This is a great community now, but it's had its share of problems. When I was a kid, our community had high unemployment, a lack of resources for families, and lots of kids hanging out with no adult supervision. You might have heard about adverse childhood experiences, or ACEs. ACEs are traumatic events in childhood, like abuse and neglect, that can increase risk for future problems. But they don't have to. The good news is that ACEs and their consequences can be prevented. Take me, for example. I was at risk for ACEs, and despite all the things that put me at risk, some pretty incredible people helped make sure that I wouldn't become another statistic. Come on, I'll show you around. That's Jackson. He's a cool kid. His dad left when he was 2, and his mom works 2 jobs. I hang out with him every Thursday night and help him with his homework. Sometimes we grab ice cream. It's fun. Plus, he has another adult role model to learn from and trust. That's Mr. Martino. When I was a kid, he let me help him at the store sometimes after school when my parents were working late. He did that for a bunch of us. My dad actually found his job as a mechanic because of Mr. Martino. This helped our family in so many ways. Not only did my dad have a steady paycheck, which eased his stress about paying rent and buying necessities like food and clothes, but he was also a lot nicer to me, my brother, and my mom once he started working a job that made him feel good about himself. When communities come together, they can do so much to prevent ACEs. Mr. Martino and other local business owners put together a series of career workshops to help people like my dad find work. My mom also got a job with a company that allowed her to work from home and spend more time with me and my brother. Mariana has just gotten out of a class about handling challenges of single parenting. The clinic offers free childcare so Mariana's daughter, Ella, can play while Mariana's in class. The class helps parents like Mariana develop positive parenting skills, not just for babies and toddlers, but for teenagers too. This is another way our community has come together to give families the resources they need. And just one more way to prevent ACEs. This was my school, Riverside Middle, right in the heart of town. These kids are here for a sponsored summer camp. This community supported program helps families with affordable, quality childcare and helps kids get tutoring and learn life skills. When I was a kid, I spent a lot of time at this school all year long. There was one counselor, Miss Greer, who I remember more than anyone. She was a really good listener. Miss Greer helped me and my brother get involved in after-school activities like baseball and soccer. Our coaches were super nice and were mentors to us. Staying after school for practice kept us and a lot of other kids out of trouble. When schools help take responsibility for preventing ACEs, everybody wins. My life could have gone in a completely different direction. Studies show that ACEs can have long-term negative effects on kids' health and well-being that may last into adulthood and even continue in future generations. But by people and groups taking action, ACEs can be prevented. In fact, there are 5 known strategies that help stop ACEs before they even start. You can implement them in your own community, just like we did. How? By strengthening economic support for families, by changing social norms to support parents in positive parenting, by providing quality care and education early in life, by enhancing parenting skills to promote healthy child development, and by intervening to lessen harms and prevent future risk. So, now you know my story, and you've seen the prevention strategies in my community that helped me beat the odds. I had healthy relationships with my family and friends. I learned how to take care of myself and make good choices. And today, I'm a mentor to other kids who need some extra help so they don't become an ACEs statistic. Safe, stable, and nurturing relationships and environments are essential to prevent child abuse and neglect and to assure that all kids reach their full potential. Are you thinking what I'm thinking? Banana split? You got it.
So I'm posing this question to you in the chat, but let's, have a discussion. Do you see how you in your role, so whether we're in a program or whatever your role might be in relation to young people, how you can work to mitigate and prevent trauma? And some of you may have saw yourselves, in the video. So yeah, let me know some reflections from that. Do you see how you in your role, your program can help to mitigate and prevent trauma, and how? And feel free to come off mute as well. And this can be a reflection question that we take with us, right? So once we have this information about what it means to be trauma informed and use development practices, we can kind of make that plan as a program for our program leaders on the call about what we can do and what our role is and who we can be collaborating with, right? There's a lot of moving parts and different people featured in the video. Him says, I can utilize this when checking in with his interns. Great. Amanda, through mentorship, building trust, and creating an emotionally and physically safe environment for our service members. Yes, yes. And we're going to hit all these things when we talk about our peace development practices. Providing a safe space with caring adults for students after school. Yes. Yeah, Marcella is a school counselor. So yeah, definitely you have a role here. That extra added layer of support. And so much about this is about mentoring in general, right? Is adding that extra layer of support, flooding our young people with caring adults. It says it takes a village to raise a kid. Yeah, right? We didn't just see a parent and a child in the video. We saw their whole community. And listening. Oh, Michael. Great point. Hearing their voices and what they need and not assuming that I know. And we're going to talk about exactly that, right? What it means to be developmental rather than prescriptive, which means to know that, or to think you know the best for a young person. And Melissa's a teacher. Yes, absolutely a role. Awesome. So this is an info sheet from the CDC. Where this was taken from is on page 5 to 6 in your handout, the full handout about this. But this is the why of our work today, right? Why we're talking about trauma, those first two R's, and the benefits of kind of moving to be trauma informed, and why we're raising awareness, right? It's like because now it's one thing to know, right? But to have true awareness. So when we think about the benefits of that, it changes how people think about the causes of ACEs, right? And who could help prevent them, which we kind of just talked about is we could all have a role, right? Shifting the focus from individual responsibility and putting the purpose of however that trauma happened on those individuals to community solutions. And again, how we can all collaborate to prevent trauma. Reducing stigma. So much about trauma and mental health and things like that is wrapped up in the stigma that prevents, parents seeking support for their parenting challenges or for things like substance use and depression and suicidal thoughts. Stigma is a huge issue, which is one of the reasons that we're talking about it openly today. And I hope you will, after this, talk about it openly in your work. And again, a lot of you hit this in the chat. Raising awareness can help us all be more informed to promote safe, stable, nurturing relationships and environments everywhere children live their lives. So where they live, where they learn, where they play, where they are mentored, at your program. And David Lloyd just dropped a resource in the chat. Yeah, David, make sure you also send those to our newsletter so we can highlight them there. Rebecca, can you send David the communications email? That'd be great. Yes, you all. Cool. So now we're moving into the what can be done, right? For those who have experienced trauma, and it can look like a lot of things. So we have in our red, therapy, individual, group therapy, family therapy, depending on the situation. And there's all kinds of therapy. If you're not familiar. So CBT is one. EMDR, eye movement desensitization and reprocessing therapy, is specifically a trauma therapy. General psychoeducation, which can help with building those coping skills, helping build skills around emotional regulation, and education for parents as well, for parents who are parenting young people who have experienced trauma. And then in the yellow, we have not therapy, but our school resources. So we have some school counselors in the chat. So a school counselor, a guidance counselor, and depending on your school, some schools do have access to psychiatrists and therapists. So getting to know the resources at your school that your young people have access to and the limit of those resources. So as far as this trauma treatment, it's my dog barking. It could be one or multiple of these things. And then we also have support groups. So this could be so that's meeting in a group, often facilitated by a mental health professional, and these can be often age specific or trauma specific. Demetrius, I see you have a question. Please drop it in the chat. And then teal, we have might become inpatient treatment. So this may be not immediately following a trauma, but a period of time after, when due to the symptoms becoming unbearable, that their coping skills being insufficient, or against their positive health outcomes, when they're experiencing a negative impact affecting their daily functioning, or suicidality, health issues, relational problems. This could be a treatment that somebody would need on a day to be monitored and supervised, potentially even be court ordered. So that is kind of types of treatment that may be a resource to someone who has experienced trauma. Hold on one second while I quickly yell at my dog, and Demetrius. Yeah, so Demetrius was talking about the connection between trauma and mental health. Right, because trauma affects our brains, my dog just came in. Because trauma affects our brains, it can have an impact on our mental health. And we'll talk about in a little bit about the overlap between trauma and other mental health conditions, and that trauma and PTSD often have similar symptoms to other mental health conditions as well. And there is that comorbidity with mental health. Butterbeans. My dog is Butterbeans. That's enough. All right, thanks, Demetrius. Great. Ah, not what I meant. Okay, medication to treat mental health can be a really important part of treatment. That was not on the previous slide, and I bring it up because medication is often really stigmatized. And we want to destigmatize it. Talking about it today to you also, we can destigmatize it. And there's lots of reasons that it is stigmatized. You know, is there trust with providers? The providers who are giving medication, but we want to make some points about medication. So medication can assist with that regulation and stabilization of symptoms. That's enough. Which can allow for more progress with counseling. Medication itself is not a solution, right? It's not one, if someone receiving treatment, we talked about potentially accessing more than one kind of treatment. Medication is a type of treatment that should be in conjunction with other forms of treatment. So it should be combined with therapy, at least another mental health professional. You know, medication takes time to work, 4 to 6 weeks for noticeable results, which often with medication, we want an instant result, right? We want our symptoms to go away. But that's not, it's something that we have to be patient about. And again, should be in conjunction with other providers. And obviously should always be taken as directed. So what I want to address when there's an issue of trust with providers, this is where I would say then we need to find other providers. As someone who has had lots of connections with the healthcare system regarding complicated physical health matters, right. I've come to realize that when we can't, when we're not getting what we need from our providers, there can be another provider out there. And that journey to meaningful treatment can be difficult, which is what we're talking about on this next slide, but it is worth it to find providers who can provide the accurate services that you need. So I'm hearing that my dog is very popular in the YouTube chat. He's very famous. But our limitations and challenges to trauma treatment. And I bring this up not to get us all bummed out, but rather so when we may be helping to direct young people or a traumatized person to services, what we can set expectations and help support someone through. So for young people, you know, not every child will receive counseling. We assume that something happens, that parents know, and maybe other providers know, that they will, you know, be referred to counseling right away. It's not necessarily a guarantee, even for young people who may be, you know, in foster care and involved with children's services. It doesn't necessarily mean that it's, you know, a straight shot to meaningful counseling for them. Period. There's a shortage of therapists of all kinds right now. And when we think about access, that is extremely limited. And we think about therapists who are super trained and experienced in trauma, that's an even smaller number. And then you have young people, you know, a child trauma therapist versus you know, a trauma therapist for adults. The numbers are getting smaller and smaller, unfortunately. And especially right now, as has been exacerbated from the pandemic, there's been a high rate of burnout with therapists. Does not mean they're not out there, because they are. My best friend happens to be a child trauma therapist. What are the odds? They're out there, and you can connect people with them. For our adults who are experiencing trauma, they might not even seek treatment as well, due to stigma, due to wait lists, due to that lack of access and insurance and things like that. And again, if we are helping a family through this, we want to keep that in mind, that they may need encouragement to seek treatment and someone to kind of go along that journey with them. Not all treatment is culturally sensitive. So we're talking about people being trained in supporting people with trauma, but there is this cultural aspect as well, which we'll also talk about with our youth development practices later. But we want to think about that our BIPOC communities are often overdiagnosed with mental health condition, period. African Americans have a long and repetitive history of being abused by systems of care, which causes distrust, which is 100% fair. And therefore, we know that BIPOC communities tend to use treatment at a much lower rate. There are resources. I'm promising you there are resources. The Black Mental Health Alliance here in Maryland connects Black mental health providers with communities seeking therapists who have had that cultural competency and are there to serve those communities. So again, I don't bring this up to say that there is no help or nothing we can do, or that treatment is totally inaccessible. It's not, but it is about getting you and your program, whoever it may be, helping to connect people with resources to know the barriers and to do that extra step of connecting with meaningful treatment. And I really believe that it is out there. I'm hopeful about this, right? As I bring this information to you today. And then I've been kind of, hinting at this idea of misdiagnosis and overdiagnosis. So this is something that is common, right? A lot of these disorders, as you can see here on the screen, have similar symptoms. And there's often for people with PTSD that they also have a comorbidity with other mental health conditions. So if a provider is not trauma informed, a young person may be diagnosed with ADHD instead of PTSD. We often find that also people with ADHD that's not managed well may also manifest as depression or anxiety. This is a complicated field, which again is why we want to ensure that the providers that we are connecting with are trauma informed, trauma trained, and again, we want to consider this information as we consider our opportunity to be advocates for the young people and the families that we serve. Okay. We are about to kind of start to make the transition. We're moving into that third R of how we can respond. And then I promise we're going to take at least a 5-minute break in just a few minutes. So we're moving into that third R of how we can respond from the awareness and the information we just got about how trauma is widespread, what communities can do about it, our community accountability, and what appropriate treatment can look like. So research has been consistent in confirming that mentors and caring adults can positively impact youth lives in several ways. And the chat, you guys are aware of that role. So just being there as support for young people is helpful. We can increase our effectiveness as mentors, as mentoring programs to ensure that we are developmental, which we'll talk much more about, by being trauma informed and by being culturally sensitive in our approach. So we want to be thoughtful in our journey with young people when we're deciding what we will do and what we will say. So we want to start a relationship or beginning with the end in mind, right? We want to talk about our mentors being developmental, what we'll talk about to increase protective factors and assets. So protective factors are the opposite of a risk factor, right? That keep young people on the path to reach their potential. We want our mentor to have a strong relationship with young people, obviously, and to be effective to enhancing them and their access to assets, which we'll talk more about. We want our mentors to be trauma informed and culturally sensitive. First and foremost, to be able to build a strong relationship and then that end in mind, happy, healthy young people with strong developmental assets. And we're going to talk more about those assets in a few slides. So what does it mean to be developmental? And in your handout, starting on page 7, where we start to talk, there's a lot of resources about developmental relationships. So know that that is there for you. But again, in this third R, what can we do in our roles now that we're realizing the widespread nature of trauma, how it affects individuals? And we saw in the chat earlier, somebody was talking about being a prescriptive or avoiding being a prescriptive mentor, right? So the difference between a developmental mentor and a prescriptive mentor. And we're trying to be developmental mentors. So can I have a volunteer, or Rebecca, if you'd like, to read our screen for us? So starting with developmental mentors versus prescriptive mentors.
I will go ahead. Just one, or go ahead with all?
You can hit it. You can do it.
Okay. All developmental mentors ask the mentee what they would like to do during the match meeting versus a prescriptive mentor who would tell the mentee what they need to do during the match meeting.
You can hit them on.
Okay, let's keep going. Listen, a developmental mentor would listen more than talk. Prescriptive would give advice more than listen. Developmental, play games, just hang out, or help with homework, depending on what the mentee asks for that day, while a prescriptive mentor would focus on hard tasks to meet specific goals based on what the mentor thinks the mentee needs. Developmental, allow the mentee to naturally bring up issues and concerns about his or her life, while a prescriptive mentor would push the mentee to talk about the issues or concerns about his or her life. And finally, a developmental mentor would build to help to build the mentee's own confidence to solve problems and be successful, while a prescriptive mentor would try to fix the mentee and the mentee's problems.
Yes, thank you so much for giving me a quick break from talking. So yeah, let me know in the chat. These prescriptive mentors are often the mentors that we kind of see in media and things like, right? Do you have any experience trying to coach people from being prescriptive mentors to developmental mentors? And then there's another question in the chat. Is this specifically talking about mentoring just youth who have experienced trauma? So we want to be developmental with our relationship with all young people, because again, we might not necessarily know or be aware that a young person has experienced trauma. So we want to take our developmental approach that's also trauma informed and culturally sensitive, and utilize it for all of our young people who, statistics say, probably some have experienced trauma. So this is our approach that might be particularly beneficial for young people who have experienced trauma, but we want to use this approach with all of our young people. And again, moving away from being prescriptive mentors, which is kind of the origin of mentoring, and if you know where mentoring began many, many years ago, of course, but we want to again move to this developmental. Yeah, so Rebecca says she has experience as speaking of mental health providers, right? Being a little bit more prescriptive than developmental with their patients. Yes, thank you for sharing. So I'm going to leave this quote up for us to read, but also allow us to take a break. It's 10:55. So I'm going to, because we're about to transition into learning about what it means to be developmental. So we're going to take a 5-minute break, read this quote while you're on your break, and we will come back together in just 5 minutes. So it's 10:50, now it's 10:56. We'll come back at 11:01. And if somebody wants to read the quote, let me have on our screen here.
Whether the burdens come from the hardships of poverty, the challenges of parental substance abuse or serious mental illness, the stresses of war, the threats of recurrent violence or chronic neglect, or a combination of factors, the single most common finding is that children who end up doing well have at least one stable and committed relationship with a supportive parent, caregiver, or other adult.
Yes, thank you, Haiti. I hope I said your name right. Yes, so again, we're talking about burdens of all different kinds of trauma, right? Poverty, abuse, serious illness, things like war, violence, a combination of those things. What comes up again and again in the data is that a young person needs stable and committed relationship with an adult, with a caring adult, whether that's a parent, caregiver, or another adult. Ideally, us as mentors, we're being an extra supportive adult in a young person's life. The more supportive adults, the better, which again is why our mentoring programs exist and why you built your programs, right? So we want to ensure that we have caring adults, and our best kind of prepared caring adults is to be developmental. So we're going to talk about in this next slide about where we consider in our relationship. We want to think about where we are in a relationship with a young person, what that allows us to do when it comes to practicing being developmental. So, well, the question I'm going to pose to you, and now that we kind of see the different stages on our screen, where are you in your mentoring journey? But it starts at stage 1, this kind of beginning, building, and the honeymoon phase of a young person making assigned a mentor, and it's all very exciting. Getting to know each other, we have those first impressions. Both sides are ideally trying to see the positive of the relationship, and you're doing that kind of initial bonding and building trust. And then stage 2, which is when young people do what young people do, which is to test us, challenge us, and test the commitment, right? Especially if young people experience trauma or percent of experienced abandonment, they're going to potentially test you, right? To see if you're really committed, which is why we saw on the previous slide, it's about being a committed caring adult, right? That situation might be difficult. But on both sides, maybe rethinking those first impressions. But then we get to stage 3, the good stuff, ideally the longest stage of a mentoring relationship. So Everything's feeling good, we're feeling more connected, trust is there, trust is really established, which again takes a while for it to get to the stage of real trust being built. We're seeing our young people grow and change and develop as young people are wont to do. And then we have this kind of deeper bond and connection that can be formed over the distance of stage 3, right? And then we have kind of our closure, transition and closure. So in this part of relationship, you want to be preparing for closure. We actually just did a great training about closure. It's on our YouTube, facilitated by Kiana. But this is a really important part, is that we are preparing both sides for closure, whether that's, we're closing for the school year, a young person is graduating, a young person becoming an adult. Potentially, our mentee may be a little bit start to pull away as kind of to protect themselves, and you may find yourself doing that as well, right? But we're at this deeper part of our relationship, and then we're doing the reflection as our relationship is changing. So whether it's just literally changing because the young person's an adult or they're no longer in the program, but you may still be in touch, it's a time for both sides to kind of participate in reflection. So yeah, if you are a mentor or serving young people, let me know, what stage you are at in the chat and how you're at that stage, right? So the other thing we want to think about when we're thinking about where we are in the mentoring journey is that relationships take time, period. And especially for those young people who are in structured mentoring programs, they're being matched, they have a staff member at the program who monitors the relationship. Especially those manufactured relationships may take more time. We also have what are natural mentors, right? The natural caring adults that show up in young people's lives, teachers, guidance counselors, the bus driver, people in your community, a coach. Those kind of natural mentors, relationship may move a little bit faster, but it still takes time. And those manufactured relationships in our programs will likely take even more time. Even relationships with, those licensed professionals a young person may be working with, a therapist, a doctor, those things take time as well. And also, as mentors, we often want to see the positive results, and improvements in self-esteem and symptom improvement take time. And I would say patience is the most important part of being an adult working with a young person, but particularly when we're thinking about relationship development, patience is really, really key. And in our roles as adults, we have more ability to practice patience than young people. So we want to be sure that we're really practicing patience as we are developing our relationship with young people. Great. So now we're going to get into the Search Institute, which starts on page 7 of your handout. And Search Institute is an amazing organization that does tons of research and data collection on young people. And there's a lot of research behind this framework, which again is the developmental relationship framework. So we are going to describe the ways of how we can be developed with our mentee. And what we know, or what the Search Institute knows, is that when young people are more likely to grow up successfully when they experience developmental relationships. So we're going to talk about the 5 elements that make powerful relationships for young people. I see Reggie. Reggie's at the beginning, so he's kind of in that stage 1 right now. Great. So we're going to talk about, again, the 5 elements of the developmental relationship framework. So it starts with express care. We're speaking from the voice of the young person. Show me that I matter to you, right? Provide support. Help me complete tasks and achieve goals. Challenge growth. Push me to keep getting better. Share power. Treat me with respect and give me a say. And then expand possibilities. Connect me with people and places that broaden my world. So one, drop in the chat maybe which one of these elements you think you may be really, really good at. A lot of us, have our strengths and almost preferences when it comes to the elements of developmental relationships. But I'll say often the one that adults struggle with the most is sharing power, right? It's not something that our society at large is built to do, is to share power with young people. Young people, as a class, as a group, don't have a lot of power, period. So it can be hard sometimes for adults to share power with people, period. But again, we'll talk a little bit more about how to do it. So I see people in the chat talking about being good at expressing care, expand possibilities, provide support. And it's really good to do. And there's a resource in your handout to do that kind of reflection about what your kind of strengths are and how you manifest manifest the elements into your relationships. And it's something that I would encourage if you train mentors or supervise mentors to do with them as well. Because it's always good to kind of reset, because we find that from our relationships as young people, how people were developmental with us, we tend to then apply with our relationship with young people because we assume that it works, right? And that works, right? I was challenged a lot. People were always challenging my growth as a young person, and I tended to do that a lot in my career as youth development professional, which not every youth needs. So it finds that youth need all aspects of the developmental relationships. Right. I am seeing some shared power people in the chat, so good, love it. So this next resource, which is on page 11 of your handout, we see here at the top, is this the way to find? Okay. We see here at the top, those stages of the relationships, right? The beginning of build, stage 1, stage 2, stage 3. And then we see here on the side, the 5 elements of the developmental relationships. And each one of these little things here are how we can practice that element. So when we express care, we're listening, we're believing, we're being warm, we're encouraging a young person, we're sharing power, we're respecting, including, collaborating, letting young people lead, when we're providing support, we're helping them navigate, we're empowering them, we're advocating for them, we're setting boundaries as well. We're expanding possibilities, providing inspiration, we're broadening horizons, we're making connections for them in the greater world. And when we come down to challenging growth, we're doing that by expecting our young person's best, we're helping them stretch, we're holding them accountable, and we're helping them reflect on failures. So again, this is how we practice each element of the developmental relationship framework. And then here we have when it's kind of appropriate or when it can really highest yield of results, practice those aspects of each element. So from the beginning, we want to be dependable. We don't want to listen, right? That's what we see with this blue. It's going all the way over. We can start expressing care from the beginning, and it will be authentic and ideally be received well. From the beginning, we want to be sharing power. We want to be making it clear that we respect the young person that we work with and that we're including them in decisions that we make. We saw on the development slide a few slides ago, right? We're including them. We're sharing power about letting them decide, how we spend our time together and things like that. So you'll see that some of these elements, are more meaningful when it gets to that real mentoring side of the relationship. When especially comes to challenging growth, if you're challenging from the jump, that might affect your ability to be in those really effective building stages of the relationship. Expanding possibilities. Well, this is something that we often as adults want to do quickly because we know the possibilities. We know we've had more time here on earth to connect our young people, but it might not always be received well without the trust that's being built in these first 2 situations. So again, this is a really, really great tool. I encourage you, for anybody that supervises mentors, to share this with them. And again, consider how we're practicing these things, period, and then where we are in the relationship and how effective it is. Cool. So now we're getting into the developmental assets that are referred to a few slides ago. And this is on page 12 to 15 in your handout. And the developmental assets are broken by different stages of young people's development. So ages 3 to 5, 5 to 9, age 12, and 12 to 18. And you'll see that at the top of those pages. And they're broken into external assets and internal assets. So what the Search Institute knows for sure in their research about these developmental assets is that the more developmental assets a young person has, the more positive their outcomes. So we want to consider what these assets are, and again, how our role of a mentor, a program leader, etc., how we can potentially influence and increase the assets of the communities that we serve. When we talked about that kind of community responsibility earlier. So it's, again, like I said, it's broken into external assets, which you see here, and internal assets, which we're going to look on the next slide. So these external assets are things kind of outside of the young person that they themselves might not have influence over, especially as a young person. So I'm not going to read all of them. I'll shout out a few, but if any are standing out to you, let me know in the chat. So we're breaking these down into support. What does that look like? Do they have family support? Do they have positive communication? Is there neighborhood caring? Do they have a caring school environment? Empowerment. What are the values of the community the young person is in? Are the children or people in the children's home sharing power with them? Do they feel safe? Boundaries and expectations. Are there clear boundaries in everywhere that a young person exists, in their family, at school, in their neighborhoods? Do they have adult role models? Do they have you, right? Do they have positive peer influence? Again, these are the things outside of the young person. Are they able to use their time constructively? Are they in cool mentoring programs? Are they, have creative activities? They're by a religious community. At time at home, do they have high quality interactions with their family? So again, these are those external assets. We have 20, and then we have 20 internal assets. And again, I want you to think about how you can help influence a young person to have more of these assets or build these assets, right? So when it comes to the internal assets, which again, we can potentially help them build, this comes down to commitment to learning. How can we get our young people motivated to be engaged in their learning, feeling bonded with school, reading for pleasure? How are we influencing them to have positive values, caring about equality, about honesty, about responsibility, about living a healthy lifestyle, having those positive coping mechanisms, and then our social competencies. How are we helping our young people, build their ability to plan and make good decisions, to have interpersonal relationships. We'll talk a little bit on the next slide. Cultural competency, which we talked about that we need to do it. How do we build that in our young people as well? Resistance or resilience and conflict resolution, something that young people developmentally may struggle with, but how do we help young people learn to resolve conflict? And then positive identity. How do we help people build this positive self-view of themselves? So they feel that they have power in their lives, that they're helping them build self-esteem, that they feel that they have a sense of purpose, and they have a positive view of the future. So a lot of us who have worked with populations that we know who have experienced poverty or experienced trauma, a positive view of the future can be really difficult for those groups. So how can we help, right? So what I'm going to pose to you all is that we consider social emotional learning and doing activities to build these skills. So this is page 16 in your handout. This is from CASEL. What does CASEL stand for again? Communities Advancing Social and Economic Learning. Boom. So I know that there are schools that adopt CASEL as like their framework for how they live out their entire school. But this is a framework for building social emotional learning that, that we want to get engaged in with our young people and to give us perspective again on how we can help influence them. So again, these are all the things that influence our young people's social emotional learnings, their homes and communities, schools, classrooms, which again, we saw on those external assets, right? And these are the skills that we want them to build so they can help build those internal assets and also build those coping skills for getting by through life, because everybody needs coping skills, not just people who experience trauma, right? So we should all be helping our young people build those coping skills, which can kind of be broken down into these kind of 5 categories: self-awareness, self-management, responsible decision-making, relationship skills, and social awareness. So I don't want to spend too much time breaking these down. Oh gosh, how do I turn off my user plan? Oh no. Oh, goodness. Okay, we're good. Yeah, I tried to get too fancy with the later corner, but I really wanted to. Okay, so to break those down, and again, this is in your handout as well. We want to think about what activities we can do with our young people, how our mentors can help to influence and also model these things, right? So when we read over these things about self-awareness and self-management, I can find that, I'm also not great at these things all the time. And there's many things that I still need to build so I can model it for my young person. But we want to help our young people get better at self-awareness, right? Helping to identify emotions, which is something that young people that's the part of being a young person, is that you're learning how to do that. How can we help them get engaged in that learning? Whether that's a restorative practice where when young people come into your program every day, we ask how everyone's doing, right? I used to work with 2nd and 3rd graders many years ago, and whenever we came in, we would have them go stand next to the emoji that they felt like that day. And then we would ask about it, right? Why are you next to the frowning emoji? And helping them get to identify their emotions and see where they're really coming from, which again, their ability to do that depends where they are developmentally, of course, but can also they can get more engaged in that through structured activities that you can do at your program. So we want them to, again, we're trying to build that self-confidence, helping them recognize their strengths, and you'll see how these connect with those assets that we talked about earlier. Self-management, something that we all go to work on, right? And how can we help young people do that? So with impulse control, managing our stress, self-discipline, self-motivation, goal setting, which we could do a whole training about how to help people with goal setting, and being organized, right? And the next part of that chunk was social awareness and relationship skills. So for anybody working with young people, I know that you are working on helping young people get along and things like that by helping with that relationship building. And a mentoring relationship can also help young people see how to have a positive relationship. Lucille, you will definitely get the slides. So a mentoring relationship can really help model a lot of these things, but specifically when it comes to relationship skills and social awareness, right? Perspective taking, building empathy, appreciating diversity. That starts with us as adults, right? As models, and showing respect for each other. We saw that respect is at the very beginning of what we can do in our relationship with young people. We need to come in with respect for young people. And then lastly, responsible decision-making. So again, helping young people with their ability to make positive choices, to help them identify what their problems are, right? Analyzing situations, problem solving, evaluating, reflecting. Again, these are things that mentors can do in their relationship with young people through conversation, through structured activities that your program can build for them. But helping them build these skills, which will look differently at each kind of developmental stage, of course, 5 to 9-year-olds, it's going to look different than with our teenagers. But I wanted to share it with you all. Again, there's resources in your handout about this, but there's also on the CASEL website tons and tons of resources that I encourage you to check out, so you can support in your program and in your mentors, or with your mentors, I should say. So I want to talk about now about this cultural sensitivity that I've been hinting at throughout. We actually don't have time to get totally into it because this is a whole nother training in 90 minutes that we could spend. But we want to introduce it to you here, and there are resources at the link that Rebecca just dropped in the chat. This is from the Becoming a Better Mentor resource that has been released by the National Mentoring Partnership that I mentioned earlier. And there is a whole chapter of this resource about what it means to be a mentor practicing cultural humility. So we're going to watch a quick video that describes it and kind of summarizes the chapter, but you can access it there by download, by audio book as well, and it's also translated into Spanish. So that resource is there. And then if you want to watch our cultural humility training, it's on our YouTube. So we'll watch this for now.
Becoming a better mentor. Strategies to be there for young people. Practicing cultural humility. Cultural humility is an ongoing, lifelong process of self-reflection and learning about how social identity and experiences are shaped by systems of oppression, power, and privilege. Social identity is a person's sense of who they are based on their group membership, which can reflect physical, social, and mental characteristics and can be self-claimed or ascribed by others. Everyone has multiple social identities. As such, cultural humility is important in all mentoring relationships. Even if mentors and mentees are similar in important characteristics, like race or gender, because there are likely many other ways that they differ. Cultural humility is grounded in continuous self-reflection. This involves asking questions about and exploring the many ways you define yourself. For example, your race, gender, class, ability, sexuality, and religion, and what those identities mean in the context of the power structures in the United States. Cultural humility also involves an ongoing process of learning about your mentee. Actively seek opportunities to learn about your mentee's culture, and, when warranted and invited, to participate in that culture. You may also explore how systems of oppression and privilege shape your mentee's experiences. The more you understand this, the more you will be able to offer meaningful support. Cultural humility is not cultural competence, which many people confuse. Cultural competence assumes that there is an endpoint in learning, that you can simply observe and read about another culture, then you are done. This attitude could lead mentors to be overconfident in their relationships with youth. Cultural humility is also not colorblindness. Some Americans grew up believing that seeing race is a form of prejudice and discrimination in and of itself, and even mentioning a person's race is racist. Colorblindness creates a discomfort around individuals who are racially different from you because they may feel that they can't bring their full self into the relationship. You can start building your cultural humility by reflecting on questions such as, how do my social identities shape my worldview and experiences? How have systems of privilege and oppression shaped my own identities and experiences? How do I make space in my mentoring interactions for my mentee to express their own identities? Committing and actively engaging in a process of ongoing self-reflection and learning about your own social identity is key in being the mentor who is culturally humble. See the full chapter at mentoring.org/bettermentor for more tips on how you can be a better mentor.
Okay, so Butterbeans has joined us. I hope that that's instigated some thoughts and learning to bring back to your program, and that you'll pursue looking into that resource. And this is a resource that's specifically built to speak to mentors specifically. So whereas most of the resources from the National Mentoring Partnership are for programs and such, but I encourage you to share this resource with mentors, to look into it further, to watch our training if you're interested. We will likely do it again in the next fiscal year. But if you want us to bring this training to you sooner than that, reach out to our team, because this is one of our most popular trainings for a good reason, right? Because it's so important. But we wanted to give you a taste of that here and make the point that when we come to being trauma informed, being culturally sensitive and culturally humble is really important as well. So thank you. I don't know on the slide doing that. No. Okay. So we're at that last R, and this tip sheet is also in your handout. But that last R is avoiding re-traumatization, right? So how do we, when we're considering that we're working with young people with trauma, and we may not know, right? We may not have that exact fact, but we can do this for all of our young people. I'm going to talk about specifically the benefits of doing this for young people who experience trauma. So being consistent. When I used to train mentors directly as a mentor supervisor, I would say consistency is really, really important in that stage one of the relationship period. But when it comes to trauma survivors, specifically, trauma survivors have often experienced some form of abandonment. So your consistency in how you show up, in being there when you say you will be there, helps ensure that they won't be re-traumatized by being abandoned again. And facilitating predictability. So when we think about the experience of trauma, a survivor of trauma did not have control in that experience, right? So this can result in struggles with sudden changes in environments or activities or unpredictable experiences. So we want to set clear boundaries with our young people and expectations with them, right? So whenever possible, we want to avoid significant or unexpected changes, because that can be, again, triggering for trauma survivors. And when changes are necessary, provide notice as much as possible so a young person can help make their internal adjustments. Offer choices. So we think about sharing power, right? Offer choices. But when we think about trauma, but a loss of control and a lack of choice about what happened, about their trauma, is very, very difficult. So when young people don't have a choice in the environment they're in, who's around, they can experience a sense of powerlessness that can remind them of the trauma that they were a part of. So when possible, we want to help our young people. We want to share young power with the young people and provide opportunities for voice and choice. Being non-judgmental, which I hope is obvious, but when we talk about the stigma of trauma, a young person may have experienced being judged or being criticized from others regarding their trauma, or that self-judgment and that self-criticism. So, and there's often stigmas attached to certain traumatic experiences, and we know the symptoms and potential coping issues to follow. So we want to, in our roles, not judge their experience or how they responded, how they're responding into the traumatic experiences. We want to be mindful of what we say to our young people, of course, if they're sharing something with us. That includes, our facial expressions, and which may convey shock or, another judgmental emotion if a young person is disclosing with us. So we want to be sure in this situation that we're not projecting our own thoughts and emotions, right? We're not doing that prescription about their experience. I think that would be developmental. Identifying and avoiding triggers, which I've seen some people bring up in the chat. So ideally, we want to help a young person learn what their triggers are, for them to learn, but also for you to learn in your role as a mentor or a program leader. So, we want to do this by looking for patterns and times when a young person becomes dysregulated or stressed, and engage in conversation with them to identify, what happened that led to those kind of behaviors. And once those are identified, you can brainstorm together about how to avoid or anticipate a trigger, or what to do after a trigger may have happened. Never to force or demand action. So if your mentee does not want to talk about something, leave it at that, right? If they're struggling to focus, try not to be overly strict or harsh. Again, we want to notice when we talked earlier about strategies, symptoms, coping mechanism, we want to acknowledge that those kind of behaviors, a young person not paying attention, et cetera, could be a coping strategy. So we want to try to understand, how certain behaviors may be helping them to get regulated, to feel safe, and try to help them understand how and when certain behaviors are acceptable, and supporting them in learning those coping strategies so they can, be fully present and a part of the group. And then period, always being calm and controlled in our behavior and our responses to their behaviors. So that's, young people do crazy stuff. I tell a story often in this training about, I was in the cafeteria with a group of like young, early elementary schoolers, and there's a balcony on the second floor, and a young person that I knew had experienced trauma had jumped off the top balcony to the floor. He was fine, but the group was obviously shocked and like yelling and screaming, but my reaction was super keeping it cool. And as a result, I was able to maintain all the young people in the situation and get our young person back on track who had done that amazing job. But that's something that takes practice to do. It also has to do with attunement, which is another chapter of that Becoming a Better Mentor resource that I encourage you to explore, but that has to do with being attuned with our own feelings and emotions and how we can get attuned to our young person. And let me know if there's any questions there. And great note right in the chat. Cool. So we did it. We're almost done. We're not right yet. We hit all of our R's, right? So we've understood the widespread impact of trauma. We've talked about recognizing the signs and symptoms. We talked about how we can be developmental, how we can respond, which we're about to put into practice. And then we've discussed how we can resist re-traumatization. So I want you to open up your handout and move to the last page, where you will see a picture and a story about each of these young people, Keisha, Brian, and Kim. So Keisha, Brian, and Kim, as you'll see in your handout, each have their own life stories that you are privy to. You'll have a lot of information. These are for young people who you know their backgrounds and their experiences with trauma. So we're going to review those stories, and then in breakout rooms. And then what I'm going to ask you to do, and I will ensure that you can, this slide is also in your handout, but I'll try to keep it projected so you can see it in your breakout rooms as well, is that we want to think about how we could support this young person considering these 5 things. So we want to, again, use the concepts of the developmental relationship framework. So when we think about what we would do next for this young person, going back to the developmental relationship framework, DRF, about what we can do. We want to also consider, where we are in the relationship with this young person, how that might influence our approach. We want to be thoughtful, of course, to our mentees' experiences as a trauma survivor, and consider that when we think about what we're going to do next. Of course, we want to be culturally sensitive and consider the background of the young person and how that might affect the services we want to provide. And then also identify what protective factors and developmental assets they do have. Because of course, we don't want to come out from this deficit approach where we're only seeing this young person's trauma. You'll see that there are assets and protective factors in their stories. So we want to acknowledge those and see maybe how we can help enhance those and make those as meaningful as possible for the young person, and maybe what social emotional learning skills that we can help be introduced in this kind of approach that we're going to talk about. So when you get into breakout rooms, and I'm going to try to name the rooms after the young people. So when you get into the room, you'll know that you're talking about Keisha, Brian, or Cam. But when you get into your breakout rooms, essentially I want you to brainstorm what you would do next, taking all these things into account. So you're serving Keisha, you're now trauma informed, you know about how it means to be developmental, etc. How can you now, what are you going to do next to support this young person? Knowing what you know about them and knowing what you know about everything we talked about today. Are those directions clear? Let me know. Drop a 1 in the chat if that made sense and you know what to do. For Keisha raising your hand, talk to me. I can clarify. Someone's raising their hand.
Sorry,
Okay.
wrong reaction.
Oh, okay, great. All right, so I'm making sure that we're all on the same page. I'm gonna pause the recording. We're all coming back from our breakout rooms. I think just about everybody is back. Thank you for participating. I was talking to our friends on YouTube who are doing a great job. So yeah, let's start with Keisha. What did you guys think of her story? How would you apply, you know, these kind of focus points to providing services to Keisha? So feel free to drop in the chat, come off mute and share for a little bit. We have about 10 minutes to share out. Yeah, thinking about Keisha's story, what can we do for Keisha?
For Keisha, we kind of talked about her situation with her relationship with her mother, and being in foster care. I think one of the deepest things we talked about was Jamel had mentioned finding services for her for the abuse and the trauma in her past, and knowing that the relationship's not going to be an instant positive relationship. But oh, and he actually wrote it right in the comments, which is perfect. Just having people and that resources for her to utilize to know she's not alone, and to speak to other survivors, and even just finding resources for her mother as well to just better the relationship moving forward so they can have a relationship that's not as harmful.
Right, great. So great. I love that you don't discount the relationship with a parent, right? Even if it is from the outside, we're perceiving it, it's not necessarily positive at this time, right? But as somebody who's worked with young people in foster care and social services, the goal is always reunification and positive relationships with parents, because we know that increases positive outcomes for young people. So seeing the value in having a relationship with your mother, period, and what we can do to make it more positive, which may be resources for Keisha and for her mom, right? And I love that you acknowledge that it's going to take some time to build that trust, right? The first 2 stages that we talked about earlier may take more time. This is when we want to work on being really, really patient, which can be difficult, right? When we're working with people in difficult circumstances, but great. All right, can we talk about Brian? Feel free to come off mute, drop in the chat.
So with Brian, we briefly spoke on a couple of things, but primarily, we felt that it would be best to be a listening ear for Brian, as the relationship develops, just trying to get an understanding of what is going on, because it's said that he did enjoy school and, you know, participating in school, but somehow now he's skipping classes. So I think just being that listening ear and showing that we care will be the best approach for Brian in the beginning.
Yeah. Yeah, you made some really good points, right? That you're seeing the strength that he used to really like school, right? But obviously something's changed. Finding the source of that so we hopefully connect him back to what he used to get a lot of joy and comfort and stability from going to school. And that, especially with Brian and his situation, it's going to take a lot of listening. This is where when we think back to that developmental versus prescriptive. To be developmental is to listen more, right? To listen more than we talk, especially in those early stages of the relationship where we're really getting to know our young person. Because we might think that even from reading this paragraph that we know a lot about this young person, right? But I used to work with a social worker who would always say, you know, people are the experts of their own lives, right? Trust people to tell you who they are and what's going on with them. And even more so, trust a young person, trust a child, which typically we adults have so much trouble doing. Great, thank you so much. And then what about Kim? What can we do for Kim, knowing what we know now about being developmental?
Kim, I would we discussed you know, because she is a provider, mostly listening, trying to find out more about her and things that she may like to do outside of being a provider, you know, and maybe even possibly finding some resources for her and her family. Mostly just listening and just finding, you know, finding out her likes, like I said, outside of being a caregiver for her siblings and assisting her dad financially and working.
Yeah. Yeah. All great points. You guys are doing great. Right, when we think about young people, do they have space to be young people and develop in that way when she has a lot of responsibility at home? And ideally, a mentoring relationship, an after school program, these spaces that we create for young people, they can be separate, like have separate space to develop just their own identity, their likes and dislikes, their positive, hopefully positive coping skills that they can get joy from and utilize in the situations that they are in. That is difficult. If you're in the chat, Marcella was talking about, you know, the cultural aspects of her situation, of course. You know, she's experienced, yeah, her father is suffering from clinical depression. Again, when we think about these things passing down from our brains, her mother passed away a long time ago. She's clearly self-medicating, right? And marijuana is her coping skill, or her coping mechanism, I should say. So she needs to do some building when it comes to other coping skills. So certain aspects of the SEL that we talked about, and considering the cultural aspects that may affect her desire to engage in more healthy coping mechanisms. And then celebrating for Kim for what she's successful at, right? She's a successful caregiver and she's a job and things like that. Yeah, thank you, Michael. Yes, you guys are doing great. Love it. Feeling great about where we're all at this point. I was saying to the YouTube crew that this is an activity that you can do with mentors that you're training with your staff, to reflect on these young people's stories, but apply them to the young people that you serve, right? How can we consider these focus points that we learned about today to the young people that we serve when we're thinking about creating action plans, and hopes and goals for them within our program? So as we move to wrap up, I want to talk about, you know, the young people's perspective, right? We talked a lot about this research and data, but that research is grounded in hundreds and thousands of interviews with young people. That's what Search Institute does and why they are so great. And also, if I didn't already say, their website, tons of resources. Please go check it out. And I was very grateful to be trained by them many years ago. They're, you know, some of the best in the business. So like I said, Search Institute interviews hundreds of people or young people from all different backgrounds when they were developing the developmental relationship framework and the developmental assets. And, you know, straight from young people's mouths, we hear about the impacts of it. So it made me feel like I was a better person, like I was worth something, even if it's really hard. The staff at our program will most likely try to motivate you to do the right thing. Even though you might think it's hard, they know you can do it, right? Having a belief in a young person. Providing support, she helped me out with a nice place to live. So right, literal resources and things like that can be a really important role when it comes to sharing power. My youth leader says, I'm here, you're here, and we're equal. If we're working on something together, I can tell her, no, this is going to work, right? Validating young people's ideas and giving space for them to push back, right? Which is natural for a young person to do, which we often forget when we're trying to potentially control young people and control their outcomes, right? And then expanding possibilities. She puts you around people who reach the places you want to go in life. So young people being able to see different kinds of people and inspire them, right? An important part of expanding possibilities. And then when you see people who come from the same places as you, it gives you hope. So helping build hope in young people. We're going to watch a quick video to wrap up if I can scrabble it correctly, which I think does a good job in kind of wrapping up. We've had to put it simply what we're going to do today. So, one second. No, not yet. No. I'm deeply trying to move this ahead.
Rebecca, it's time to be
Hold
friends.
on one second. Let me see if I can put this on YouTube. Oh, here we go. I got it. This is from Ted Lasso, for any Ted Lasso fans out there. He's got himself into a betting situation, and this is what's happening.
Mate, we don't need to win. 27 something. Good luck. You know, Rupert, guys have underestimated me my entire life. And for years, I never understood why. It used to really bother me. Then one day I was driving my little boy to school and I saw this quote by Walt Whitman painted on the wall there. It said, "Be curious, not judgmental." I like that. So I get back in my car and I'm driving to work. And all of a sudden it hits me. All them fellas that used to belittle me, not a single one of them curious. You know, they thought they had everything all figured out. So they judged everything. They judged everyone. And I realized that they're underestimating me. Who I was had nothing to do with it. Because if they were curious, they would ask questions. You know, questions like, have you played a lot of darts, Ted? Which I would have answered, yes, sir. Every Sunday afternoon at a sports bar with my father from age 10 until I was 16 when he passed away. Barbecue sauce. Come on.
So, if I can make it very simple, the takeaway from that video, right, is to be curious and not judgmental. There's one thing that we can do for our young people. Again, we won't always have the information about their background, about their traumatic experiences. And maybe sometimes we will, right? When our approach to young people, first and foremost, we need to be curious, do that listening, build the trust and the space for us to have meaningful conversations with young people and for young people to let us know who they are and for us as adults to not be judgmental of it, especially with all the information that we have now, right? I hope that it's going to be easier than ever to be curious and not judgmental. So we're wrapping up for our friends on Zoom. When you close, the evaluation survey will pop up, or you can click on it now. If you want a certificate, please email me at Rebecca, if you can type in my email, that'd be great. Please email me if you want a certificate for coming today. And for our friends on YouTube, please drop my email so people can reach out to get that certificate. Slides, everything will be emailed out and will also be linked on our website and on this YouTube video. So you can access the slides and all the resources we talked about today. Our next training is in June. It will be part of Baltimore's Pride Week. It will be virtual. We hope you will come. It is with our famous guest facilitator, Clarissa Herman, who was here last year with us, who did some trainings about girls' health and girls' mental health. We're going to talk about LGBTQ terms and trends. So please, we hope to see you again in June. Thank you so much for your attention and participation today for my friends on Zoom, for my friends on YouTube. We appreciate you being flexible as well as the response today was overwhelming with your registration. So thank you so much for coming. And I'll stay on for a few minutes if you have any questions, but thank you so much.